The evening sun painted Disneyland in warm gold. Children laughed, lights flickered, and music drifted through the air. Near the carousel, a man in a plain hoodie adjusted his cap low over his eyes. It was Keanu Reeves, humble as always. Beside him, Sandra Bullock walked quietly, her smile soft but her eyes full of wonder. They had slipped in quietly, hoping to blend in like ordinary people. The first twist came fast. A small boy dropped his toy near the parade route and froze as a crowd pushed forward. Without hesitation, Keanu stepped into the stream of people, bent down, and handed the toy back with a gentle smile. Sandra watched, her heart tightening. This was supposed to be a light-hearted date, but already the park seemed to test their kindness. As they moved toward the Ferris wheel, whispers began. Some fans recognized them but stayed respectful. A teenage girl holding a handmade sign for her sick sister approached cautiously. She whispered, almost afraid to ask, if Keanu could take a picture for her sister who could not be there. Keanu knelt to her level, took the sign in his hands, and said quietly, "Let's make her day special." Sandra snapped the picture, her eyes shining. Around them, strangers noticed the gentle moment and chose not to swarm them. The world can be loud, but kindness can make it quiet. The suspense deepened when a sudden power flicker dimmed part of the park. Rides slowed, and for a moment children cried. Keanu and Sandra stepped aside near a popcorn stand, waiting. A cast member rushed by, saying a family was stuck on a ride high above. The Ferris wheel lights blinked uncertainly against the evening sky. Sandra squeezed Keanu's hand, her voice low. "They're scared up there." Keanu glanced at the operator, who looked pale and worried. He approached quietly, offering calm words. He had no special power here, but his tone carried steady reassurance. The operator thanked him and turned back to his radio. Sandra guided a group of anxious kids toward a game booth, distracting them with stuffed animals and gentle jokes. They both knew the cameras would catch none of this. It wasn't for headlines. Then came a moment of unexpected connection. A woman nearby, holding her baby, noticed them and said softly, "Thank you for being like this, even when people watch." Sandra's eyes watered. They weren't here for attention. They were here to just be human. But humanity has a way of shining, even when you try to hide it. Later, as the Ferris wheel restarted and cheers erupted, Sandra looked up at the glittering lights and whispered, "Maybe tonight isn't about hiding." Keanu nodded, the corners of his lips lifting in a small, humble smile. Their date was becoming something bigger than either of them planned, a quiet reminder that kindness doesn't need a stage. The crowd's relief washed over the park like a warm breeze. Strangers who had never spoken to each other shared smiles. A little boy waved his recovered toy like a flag. Somewhere, a camera phone had captured the sign picture, and within hours it would travel the world. Millions of hearts would melt. Not for celebrity gossip, but for a simple moment of grace in a crowded place. Sandra brushed popcorn from Keanu's shoulder, laughing softly, her voice almost a whisper. "You always do this," she said. "You make small things huge." He shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "People make them huge when they see the kindness in it." The night wasn't over. In the distance, a parade horn sounded, and new whispers began to rise around them. Somewhere between the rides and the laughter, another unexpected turn waited, one that would test their humility even more. The parade music faded into the distance as Keanu and Sandra wandered toward a quieter corner of Disneyland. Lanterns glowed along a cobblestone path, casting soft light on families finishing their day. The night air carried the smell of caramel apples and popcorn. For a moment, it felt like they had escaped the world's noise. Just two friends sharing a simple evening. A sudden cheer erupted near the wishing fountain. A street performer dressed as a magician was entertaining a small group. His hands trembled slightly and his tricks kept failing. The children started to lose interest. Keanu noticed the flicker of worry in the performer's eyes. Without saying a word, he stepped forward, pretending to stumble into the act. The magician grinned nervously, unsure what was happening. Sandra realized Keanu was about to rescue the moment. Keanu picked up a dropped deck of cards, shuffled clumsily, and then, by sheer luck or quiet skill, revealed the chosen card. The children gasped. The magician seized the chance, finishing the trick with a flourish. Laughter and applause followed. The performer whispered, "Thank you," his voice barely audible over the crowd. Sandra's heart swelled at the simple, unspoken exchange. She knew Keanu would never mention this later. His joy came from lifting someone else quietly. They moved on, passing a souvenir stand where a tired mother struggled to count coins for her daughter's small plush toy. Keanu slowed, pretending to tie his shoe, giving Sandra a small nod. She understood immediately. She approached the cashier and quietly paid for the toy before the mother noticed. When the little girl hugged her prize, her mother looked around in confusion, then gratitude when she saw Sandra's soft smile. Sandra simply winked and walked away, leaving kindness without explanation. As they rounded the corner, a light drizzle began to fall. Most visitors hurried toward shelters, but Keanu and Sandra lingered under a small archway, watching raindrops sparkle against the glowing park lights. The soft rain carried a sense of suspense, like the night was about to reveal something important. The distant Ferris wheel spun again, its lights forming a halo in the mist. Then came the unexpected twist. A young boy in a wheelchair appeared at the edge of the path, his sister struggling to push him through the slick pavement. The wheels stuck in a shallow puddle. Without hesitation, Keanu jogged over, crouched low, and helped free the wheels. He didn't just push them clear. He adjusted the chair's footrest and checked the brakes like someone who cared about details. Sandra bent down beside the boy, asking about his favorite ride. When he whispered Space Mountain, she grinned and said, "Then that's where we're headed next." A small group of onlookers gathered quietly. Nobody reached for their phones. They simply watched the scene unfold, as if the rain itself had silenced the world. Keanu and Sandra guided the siblings toward the ride entrance, chatting with them as though they had known each other forever. The ride attendant, recognizing them but sensing the moment, waved them through without drawing attention. The boys' laughter as the coaster launched echoed through the damp night. Afterward, as the siblings thanked them with wide smiles, Sandra felt her chest tighten with a deep, unspoken emotion. She leaned against a railing, watching the park lights reflect on the wet ground. "Moments like this," she whispered, "remind me why I believe in people." Keanu stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, quiet as usual. Finally, he said, "People are good more often than we think. Sometimes they just need a little spark to show it." They continued walking, rain dripping from their jackets, when a faint commotion drew their attention. Near the Main Street bakery, a small group of employees huddled nervously. A delivery cart had tipped over, scattering pastries and hot drinks across the pavement. An elderly custodian was trying to clean the mess alone, slipping slightly on the wet ground. Without a second thought, Sandra grabbed napkins from a nearby counter, while Keanu crouched beside the man to help lift the cart. A family passing by joined in, inspired by their actions. Within minutes, the mess was gone, and the custodian whispered a shaky, "Thank you." Keanu simply patted his shoulder and smiled. As the rain eased and the park music swelled again, a sense of calm returned. But in the shadows beyond the carousel, a paparazzi photographer quietly raised a camera. He had followed them discreetly all evening, waiting for a scandal or a headline. Instead, he had captured quiet acts of grace. He lowered the camera for a moment, unsure whether to intrude on something so genuine. Keanu and Sandra didn't notice. They were too busy sharing a churro under a twinkling tree, laughing softly about an inside joke from years ago. In their laughter was a hint of resilience. Two people who had endured public scrutiny, personal heartbreak, and long roads of recovery, yet still found joy in small things. Their date was turning into a chain of ripples. A magician's confidence restored, a child's toy gifted, a boy's laughter on a ride, a custodian's burden lifted. None of it planned, none of it for show. The park around them glowed brighter for reasons most people would never understand. As they prepared to leave, the photographer finally clicked a photo. But when he looked at the image, Keanu leaning slightly toward Sandra, both of them smiling like ordinary people, he felt a surprising tug at his heart. It wasn't gossip he had captured. It was a reminder that kindness can still be headline-worthy, even without words. As fireworks bloomed overhead, Keanu glanced at Sandra. "Tonight wasn't just sweet," he said quietly. "It was needed. she smiled back, her eyes reflecting the sparks in the sky. For them, she whispered, and maybe for us too. They didn't know it yet. But that single photograph and the stories whispered by strangers would ignite a wave of warmth across the internet by morning, melting millions of hearts, not with fame, but with simple, unguarded humanity. The next morning dawned with a soft, golden glow over Los Angeles, but the world of the internet was already wide awake. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock's quiet Disneyland night had turned into a storm of gentle admiration. A single photo of them under a twinkling tree, laughing, sharing a churro, was everywhere. Hashtags about kindness, humility, and real love trended across platforms. Yet Keanu and Sandra were unaware. They were still asleep, holding on to the peace of a night that had felt almost private. By the time Sandra sipped her morning coffee, her phone was buzzing nonstop. She ignored it at first, thinking it was the usual noise. But a message from her assistant caught her eye. You two went viral overnight. But in the best way. Sandra frowned, half amused, half concerned. She tapped a link and her breath caught. Thousands of comments spoke not about fame, but about the small acts they had done. The toy for the little girl, the wheelchair boy's laughter, the custodian's relief. People weren't gossiping. They were inspired. Keanu's morning was quieter. He was sitting at his kitchen table, eating cereal from a plain bowl, when his phone buzzed too. A friend had sent him a video montage already circulating online. It showed the magician's recovered trick, the siblings on Space Mountain, and the kind moment at the bakery. The video had been stitched together by strangers who had witnessed the night and shared their clips without chasing credit. Over soft music, captions read, "Kindness is still out there. Here is proof." Keanu set his spoon down, staring at the screen for a long moment. He felt something shift, not pride, but a quiet hope. Later that afternoon, Sandra met him at a small community cafe in downtown Los Angeles. She wore a baseball cap low over her eyes, but her smile peeked through. Keanu was already there, leaning back in a wooden chair, his phone face down on the table. Outside the window, a group of kids were painting a mural on a brick wall. Bright colors splashed across the gray surface. Stars, animals, and hopeful words. Their laughter drifted inside. "So," Sandra said, sliding into the chair opposite him, "we're apparently heroes now." Keanu chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No heroes. Just people caught doing what everyone should do." She studied his face, seeing the same humility that had drawn her to him years ago. "The internet disagrees," she said, sipping her coffee. "People are saying last night restored their faith in kindness." A pause settled between them. The cafe door chimed as a young woman entered, cradling a folder. She looked nervous and approached their table slowly. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I don't mean to intrude, but my name's Marisol. I run a small shelter for kids nearby. Some of them saw your photos and said maybe you'd visit. I told them it was unlikely, but I had to ask." Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance. Without hesitation, Keanu said, "What time should we be there?" Marisol's relief was visible. "Really? Even just for a few minutes would mean so much." As Marisol left, Sandra reached across the table and touched Keanu's hand. "You know this means more cameras." "Then let's give them something good to film," Keanu replied softly. That evening, they arrived at the small shelter. The building was worn but clean, with bright paper stars taped to the windows. Children of all ages crowded inside, some shy, some excited. A boy with oversized glasses held a crayon drawing of the Ferris wheel from the night before. "We saw you on TV," he whispered. "You made the park magic." Keanu knelt so his eyes met the boy's. "You made it magic by noticing," he said gently. Sandra gathered the kids in a circle, asking them about their dreams. One little girl said she wanted to be a pilot so she could fly over sad places and drop happy things. Sandra laughed softly, fighting tears. Another boy admitted he was afraid no one believed in him. Keanu looked around the room, then stood and said quietly, "Everyone in this room has something powerful to give. Sometimes the world just needs you to believe in your own light." Outside, a local news van parked discreetly. The reporter peered through the window but hesitated. The scene didn't feel like a headline, it felt sacred. He chose not to interrupt, deciding instead to share the story later with care. As the evening went on, Keanu and Sandra helped the kids paint the rest of the mural on the shelter's courtyard wall. Together, they created a sunrise of orange and pink, with small figures holding hands beneath it. Marisol watched from a distance, her hands pressed together in gratitude. A teenager who had been distant at first quietly approached Sandra and handed her a folded paper crane. "For luck," he mumbled. Sandra accepted it like a treasure. When it was time to leave, the kids gathered at the doorway, waving. One little voice called out, "Thank you for not forgetting us." The words hung in the cool night air. Keanu's throat tightened. He bent down to tie his shoe, not because it needed tying, but because he needed a second to steady himself. As they walked to their car, the city lights glittered against the dark sky. Sandra broke the silence first. "You know this will blow up even bigger now." Keanu's reply was quiet but firm. "Then let's make sure the story stays about them, not us." What they didn't know was that a stranger had recorded part of their visit, not in a way that felt invasive, but as a tribute. By morning, the video would spread across the world, showing not Hollywood stars, but two people who took time to listen, to help, to lift others up. Millions more hearts would melt, not because of fame, but because the story reminded them what humanity could look like on an ordinary evening in Los Angeles. The next chapter of their journey was already forming in the whispers of grateful children and the paint drying on a shelter wall. Somewhere out there, someone who had nearly given up would see their story and decide to try again. And somewhere else, a person with influence would choose kindness instead of cynicism because of two quiet acts that had grown into something unstoppable. The video from the shelter exploded across the internet overnight. News outlets called it the most heartwarming moment of the year, but the comments under the video were what truly mattered. People shared their own acts of kindness, small, quiet gestures inspired by what they had seen. Strangers paid for each other's groceries. Teenagers organized toy drives. A firefighter wrote, "After a hard week, seeing this reminded me why I do what I do." The world was listening, and for once, it wasn't to gossip. It was to hope. Keanu Reeves woke up to dozens of missed calls and hundreds of messages, but he ignored most of them. He walked his dog through the quiet morning streets, the leash in one hand, a to-go coffee in the other. In the reflection of a store window, he saw the mural from the shelter on a news ticker across a TV screen. His lips curved into a small private smile. He didn't care about the attention. What mattered was that a boy who once doubted himself might believe again. Sandra Bullock's morning was less quiet. Her agent called. Her friends called. Even her neighbor left a note on her door. When she finally turned on the TV, a segment played showing the paper crane the teenager had given her. The reporter's voiceover said, "Sometimes heroes wear no capes. Sometimes they wear raincoats in a storm and paint walls with children." Sandra sat on her couch, clutching the paper crane, and whispered to herself, "We can't let this just fade away." By mid-afternoon, Sandra texted Keanu, "Meet me at the mural tonight. I have an idea." The sun was setting when Keanu arrived at the shelter's courtyard. The mural glowed in the warm light, the colors richer now that they had dried. Children peeked from windows, excited to see their unexpected friends again. Sandra stood by the wall, a small backpack slung over her shoulder. "I've been thinking," she said as he approached. "What if we build on this? What if this isn't the end of the story?" Keanu tilted his head, curious. "You mean more visits?" "More than visits," Sandra replied. "A kindness chain. No press releases, no big announcements. Just small actions that ripple." She opened her backpack and pulled out a stack of small blank notebooks. "Let's leave these behind wherever we go. People can write something kind they did or saw. We won't sign our names. We'll just start sparks." Before Keanu could answer, a commotion nearby caught their attention. A teenage boy was arguing with a security guard outside a grocery store across the street. The boy's voice was shaking, his hands clenched. Sandra and Keanu exchanged a glance and walked over quietly. The guard explained that the boy had been accused of trying to take bread without paying. The boy, close to tears, insisted he had no money, but needed to feed his younger siblings. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "Let's pay for it," he said. "All of it." Sandra nodded, already pulling out her wallet. But Keanu didn't just hand over cash. He crouched so his eyes met the boy's. Taking something in fear doesn't make you bad, he said gently. But asking for help takes courage. Don't forget that. The guard softened, lowering his tone. The boy stared at them, speechless, as they bought him bread, milk, and some fruit. When they handed him the bag, he whispered, I thought nobody would care. Sandra placed one of the blank notebooks on top of the groceries. Write something kind in here when you can, she said, even if it's just a sentence. Then pass it on. As the boy disappeared into the night, the grocery store cashier, who had watched everything silently, wiped her eyes. You don't even know him, she said, voice breaking. Keanu's answer was simple. We don't have to. Later that night, they sat on the curb outside the shelter, the city hum in the background. Sandra leaned her head on Keanu's shoulder. Do you think people will keep it going? She asked. Keanu stared at the dark sky, a few stars peeking through the city lights. Kindness has its own gravity, he said. Once it starts moving, it's hard to stop. The next morning, photos of the grocery store moment began to circulate online. A witness had shared it with a caption. Hollywood royalty didn't just help, they listened. The notebooks became a quiet phenomenon. One appeared in a coffee shop across town, filled with entries about strangers holding doors, neighbors sharing meals, and children leaving notes for their teachers. Another was found on a bus seat with a message reading, Today I chose forgiveness because of a story I saw. Keanu and Sandra avoided interviews, turning down major shows that begged for exclusives. Instead, they spent their evenings driving through the city, leaving notebooks in unexpected places, under library chairs, beside hospital vending machines, near park benches where lonely souls might sit. Each notebook was a seed, and they hoped someone else would water it. But a twist was coming. As they dropped a notebook near a subway entrance one night, they noticed a man in a worn jacket watching them closely. He wasn't holding a camera or a phone, just a suspicious, searching gaze. When they turned to leave, he stepped forward. You two think this is enough? He asked, his voice rough but not unkind. The world's bigger than notebooks. Keanu studied him quietly. Maybe, he said. But even small things can reach far. The man shook his head, then hesitated. My daughter, she saw that video. She hasn't spoken to me in months. Last night she called me. Maybe you're right. He stepped back into the shadows, leaving them speechless. Sandra shivered, not from the cold, but from the reminder that even the smallest sparks can light fires in places you'll never see. As they drove away, the city lights blurred outside the car windows. Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice barely above a whisper. What if this becomes bigger than us? Keanu's eyes stayed on the road. Then let it be bigger. It was never about us anyway. Unbeknownst to them, the movement they had sparked was already spreading beyond the city. A teacher in another state held up a mysterious notebook in her classroom and told her students, Someone believed kindness matters. Now we will too. A nurse left one on a hospital bedside table, and a patient used it to write her first hopeful words in months. A single photo and a night at Disneyland had become the thread weaving strangers together across the world. The quiet revolution of compassion was only beginning, and neither Keanu nor Sandra could imagine how far it would reach, or the challenges they would soon face when the spotlight returned, testing whether humility could survive the weight of fame. The notebooks had become whispers across the world. Small towns, bustling cities, quiet villages, everywhere, stories of kindness began to surface. A fisherman in Greece found one on a bench and wrote about rescuing a stray dog at sea. A nurse in Tokyo shared how a patient smile had given her the strength to finish a double shift. Strangers left them in airports, bus stops, and cafes. Yet amid the quiet beauty, a storm was forming, one that would test Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock in a way they hadn't expected. Keanu was sitting in a modest bookstore one afternoon, flipping through a worn copy of a classic novel, when a man approached him. The man's tone was sharp. His eyes narrowed. All this kindness stuff, he said, it's just a show, isn't it? Hollywood actors trying to look good. Keanu looked up, calm but saddened. It's not a show, he replied softly. You don't have to believe in me. Just believe in what people are doing for each other." The man muttered something under his breath and walked out. Keanu watched him leave, wondering how many others thought the same. Sandra, meanwhile, received an email from a journalist who hinted at a big expose. The message suggested that their kindness campaign was being orchestrated by a publicist for attention. Sandra's chest tightened. She knew the truth, but the world often loved a scandal more than a quiet miracle. She called Keanu immediately. "They're coming for us," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're going to twist this." Keanu's reply was steady. "Then we stay the course. If it's real, it'll survive doubt." That evening, they visited a community garden on the edge of the city to plant flowers with volunteers. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, and children laughed as they dug small holes in the soil. A local teacher approached, holding one of the notebooks. "You don't know me," she said, "but this little book saved my student." He was ready to give up. He read the notes inside and decided to hold on. He said he wants to leave something kind for someone else now. Tears brimmed in her eyes. Sandra hugged her tightly, no words needed. As the garden event wound down, they noticed a young woman standing apart from the group, her shoulders hunched. Keanu approached her gently. "Hey," he said quietly, "are you okay?" She hesitated, then admitted she was a reporter sent to get a real story on them. She had been skeptical, convinced the whole movement was fake. But seeing the teacher's tears and the children's laughter had shaken her resolve. "I thought I'd catch you doing something for the cameras," she whispered. "But you're doing this when no one's watching," Sandra smiled, her voice soft. "That's when kindness matters most." The woman's eyes glistened. She lowered her camera and said, "Maybe the world needs this story to be real." She left without an interview. Her heart changed, but the pressure didn't fade. The next morning, a talk show host mocked the kindness chain, calling it celebrity virtue signaling. Comments online became divided, some inspired, others cynical. Sandra felt the weight of it as she scrolled through the noise. Doubt was loud. But then she saw a video from a rural school. Children holding one of their notebooks, reading their favorite entries aloud. Their faces glowed with hope. She closed her laptop and whispered to herself, "This is bigger than the noise." Later that week, they decided to visit a hospital's children's ward quietly. They dressed plainly, no makeup, no fanfare. Inside, they met a boy named Elias, whose thin frame and pale face spoke of a long illness. He held one of the notebooks on his lap, his small fingers tracing the edges. "I found this on a bench outside," he said weakly. "I wrote that I wish everyone could have a day without pain." Sandra knelt beside his bed, her voice breaking. "That's a powerful wish, Elias." Keanu took the boy's hand and said, "You already made the world better by writing it." As they left the ward, a nurse stopped them. "He hasn't smiled like that in weeks," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." But even as these moments multiplied, the scrutiny grew. A viral post accused them of staging the grocery store scene using actors. Another claimed the notebooks were planted for marketing. Keanu read the accusations quietly, then put down his phone. "If we fight every lie, we'll lose focus," he told Sandra. "Let's fight with actions instead." To counter the cynicism, they decided to do something bolder, yet still humble. They chose a neglected park in a rough part of the city and gathered volunteers anonymously. No press, no invitations. They cleaned the playground, painted benches, planted flowers, and left a notebook beneath the largest tree. Children from nearby apartments watched in wonder as the dull park transformed into a bright, welcoming space. One child ran up to Sandra, hugging her knees, and said, "You made our park beautiful again." Tears filled Sandra's eyes, but she shook her head. "You and your friends will keep it beautiful," she said. As dusk settled, the man from the bookstore, the skeptic, returned. He had followed the whispers about the park cleanup. He stood at the edge of the playground, watching the laughter of children. Slowly, he approached Keanu. "Maybe I was wrong," he admitted gruffly. "Maybe this isn't about Hollywood after all." Keanu smiled faintly. "It was never about Hollywood," he said. "It's about people remembering they matter." Word of the park cleanup leaked despite their efforts. Photos spread again, but this time even some skeptics softened. A well-known journalist tweeted, Not every good thing is a publicity stunt. Sometimes it's just good. The tide of doubt began to shift, but challenges remained. Big charity organizations reached out, offering sponsorships that would turn the movement into something branded and polished. Keanu and Sandra refused, knowing it would strip away the magic of anonymity. That night, they sat on a rooftop overlooking the city. Lights twinkled below like scattered stars. Sandra hugged her knees to her chest. "What if we can't control it anymore?" she asked. "What if it becomes something ugly?" Keanu looked out over the city, his expression thoughtful. "We can't control it," he admitted. "But we can keep showing up. We can keep reminding people why this started." Below them, somewhere in the sprawling city, another notebook was being opened. Someone, somewhere, was writing a simple line that would change a stranger's day. The chain was alive, fragile but unstoppable. And as the wind swept across the rooftop, Sandra reached for Keanu's hand. "Then we keep showing up," she said softly. "Always," he replied. The storm wasn't over. But in that quiet moment, under the wide night sky, they understood something vital. Even when doubt screams loudest, kindness only needs a whisper to be heard. The morning sky over Los Angeles was streaked with pink and gold when Sandra Bullock's phone began to vibrate on her nightstand. She rubbed her eyes, still tired from the previous night's rooftop vigil, and answered without checking the caller ID. It was Marisol from the shelter, her voice urgent but steady. "Someone vandalized the mural," she said. "The one the kids painted with you and Keanu. Hateful words." "They're crushed!" Sandra felt her stomach twist. Within minutes, she was on the phone with Keanu. His voice was quiet but firm. "We can't let this undo what's been built," he said. "Meet me there." By the time they arrived, the shelter's courtyard was eerily silent. Children huddled in the doorway, their bright faces dimmed by shock. Across the once vivid sunrise, crude black spray paint scrawled cruel phrases. "Fake, attention seekers, nothing matters." Marisol's eyes were wet as she held a trembling little boy who whispered, "Does this mean kindness isn't real?" Keanu crouched to the boy's level, his eyes gentle. "No," he said softly. "It means kindness is so powerful that even fear tries to erase it. But fear can't win if we don't let it." Sandra walked slowly to the wall, fingertips tracing the ugly marks. She took a deep breath, turned to the children, and said, "We're going to fix this. Not by hiding the hurt, but by making something even more beautiful." Together, they gathered supplies. Children brought old paintbrushes. Volunteers arrived with bright colors, and a local art teacher appeared, offering guidance. As they painted over the hateful words, something unexpected happened. Neighbors who had never spoken to each other came to help. A construction worker brought leftover wood to build flower boxes. A retired nurse planted marigolds along the edge. A teenager quietly wrote, "Love always outlasts hate," in tiny letters at the corner of the wall. As the afternoon sun warmed their backs, the mural transformed into something new. It was bigger, brighter, and braver than before, bursting with colors and messages of hope. Marisol whispered to Sandra, "This is stronger now." They tried to break us, but they gave us a reason to come together. Meanwhile, photos of the vandalism and the rebuild began to circulate online. Skeptics who had mocked the movement were forced to reconsider. Even the talk show host who had ridiculed them issued a rare apology on air. People from across the world shared images of their own repaired kindness notebooks saying, "We won't let darkness win." But the night still held one more test. As the park near the shelter hosted a small celebration of the restored mural, a sudden power outage plunged the block into darkness. For a moment, fear flickered again. Then, from the edge of the park, a faint glow appeared. A group of children holding solar lanterns, gifts from a stranger inspired by the notebooks. One by one, neighbors raised their phones to cast light. Laughter replaced worry. In the glow, Keanu turned to Sandra, his face softened by the lantern light. "Look," he whispered. "Even when the lights go out, people remember how to shine." Later, as the lanterns bobbed like stars, a young boy approached them holding a fresh notebook. "Can you sign it?" he asked shyly. Keanu shook his head with a warm smile. "This isn't about our names," he said. "It's about yours and everyone else who will keep this going." Sandra knelt, her eyes glistening. Write your dream, she said. Then pass it on. That's how kindness travels. In the days that followed, the kindness chain surged like never before. Notebooks crossed oceans, traveling in backpacks and mailboxes. A paramedic in Brazil wrote about saving a life. A farmer in India shared seeds with a hungry neighbor. A soldier left a note for a stranger saying, "Peace starts in small places." Keanu and Sandra kept a low profile, refusing interviews, declining offers to monetize the movement. Instead, they quietly supported local shelters, visited hospitals, and showed up where kindness was needed. They became symbols not of fame, but of humility. And yet the story was no longer about them. It was about millions of ordinary people remembering that small gestures can ripple far beyond what anyone can see. One evening, months later, they returned to Disneyland, not for cameras, but to walk among the lights that had started it all. The park was alive with laughter, music, and the smell of popcorn. Near the Ferris wheel, a young couple held one of the original notebooks, now worn and full of entries. They didn't recognize Keanu or Sandra as the ones who had begun it. They simply said to a friend, "This little book proves kindness is real." Keanu glanced at Sandra, and they both smiled quietly. No need for credit, no need for applause. They slipped into the crowd like any other visitors, their hands brushing lightly together as they walked. The fireworks lit up the sky, and in that bright, fleeting burst, they knew the chain would never end. Somewhere, someone would pick up a notebook tonight. Somewhere, someone would choose to help instead of judge. And somewhere, a child would believe again because two people chose to show up and the world decided to follow.